Social Security, other entitlement programs, a big part of the conversation in the deficit debate. There's almost no one better able to talk about the Social Security component than Jim Lockhart. He is a former deputy commissioner of Social Security, is now a vice chairman of W.L. Ross & Company. He focuses on financial services and the Mortgage Recovery Fund. We're pleased to welcome him here to the Inside Track. Jim, thanks for joining us right here in the newsroom this morning. Let's start with Social Security. You obviously have a unique perspective on that. What if we just raise the age, right? We're all going to work a little bit longer, maybe trim the benefits a little bit. How much could that really help the U.S. longer term?
Well, Social Security is a big problem. It's no longer contributing to the surplus. It's actually, there's less money coming in Social Security than going out, and that first happened last year. So it's a serious problem. The numbers are $6 trillion over the next 75 years. It's short. So it's a serious problem. We have to tackle it. President Bush tried to do it, and we didn't get there. But it has to be a combination of my way. There's really three options. Increasing taxes, slowing the growth in benefits, or investing the money better. And I think potentially it should be all three.
But do you think that Social Security is an easier problem to fix than some of the other entitlement programs that basically we're seeing everybody in Washington fight about?
Social Security is almost a mathematical problem. So yes, it is easier than the Medicare or Medicaid, which is, you know, all the technology of medicine and all the decisions you have to make. You know, the rhetoric about death panels and things like that. So yes, Social Security is easier to solve, but you have to have a political will, and there's no political will.
Let's go back for a moment before we get into questions about political will, because they are extremely important, Jim, about the difficulty of actually accomplishing entitlement reform. Does the public appreciate just how difficult this is? It's not just about politics. It's about the mechanics, as you just described. Anticipating what Medicare is going to need over the next several decades is not something many people are capable of doing effectively.
Well, that's very true. It's very tough. We actually had an educational campaign for a year or so that I went out and did things with senators and congressmen. And the amazing thing to me was the people that are already retired didn't want any changes, but the younger people wanted changes. They want changes.
No, Jim, you couldn't have been surprised. I mean, come on. If you're already getting your benefits, I don't want to say what do you care, because assumedly some of these people have children and grandchildren, but you don't think that that's obvious for the younger constituency.
But everybody says they're not going to touch anybody over 55. And so even though they were told they weren't going to be touched, they were the ones that were screaming against changes in Medicare and Social Security.
Going to medical costs, though, as you alluded to earlier, this is really the threat that's going to basically eat us alive, right? And there's not a lot of cost control in Obamacare. At least that's what his critics say. Do you agree with that point?
There's not enough. I mean, he would argue there's some there, but we need a lot more cost control, and we need people making decisions that are not paid by the government. We need people making health care decisions and making, not going to the doctor if they don't need to go to the doctor.
Jim, do you believe that we will see entitlement reform? And if so, where is it going to be? How long is it going to take to get there?
Well, I think we have to have entitlement reform, I guess is what I would say.
But we could be saying that for the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I said it 6 years ago. And it's difficult. The good thing about the debt ceiling crisis that we're facing at the moment is it's sharpening people's minds, and you see people like AARP saying that we have to do something about it finally. And you're even hearing President Obama saying we need to do something about it.
So it sounds like you're hopeful.
More hopeful than I was a year ago.
Jim, let's talk for a moment about housing. And the reason I bring this up is not because we all know housing's a problem. We do, of course. But on Friday, Warren Buffett was talking to our colleague Betty Liu in Sun Valley and said that there's no way we'll see meaningful job growth until the housing market, and in particular housing construction, comes back. You know the housing market just about as well as anybody, given your experience with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the FHFA. Is it realistic at all, with the unsold inventory of homes out there, to expect any meaningful rebound in housing construction anytime soon?
It's going to be very, very hard. The problem is that not only we have a lot of homes for sale. We have a lot of maybe 3-4 million more to be foreclosed. We have a very weak housing market. But I think
so what is Buffett talking about?
Well, I think it's partially it's a chicken and egg thing. To get unemployment down, we need housing, but to get housing up, we need unemployment to come down.
But we don't need any more houses. We're overbuilt.
We are overbuilt. Yes, I would agree with you. And people are giving up on the American dream of owning a home, and they're moving into apartments. But what I think part of the issue is, though, housing is so important to Americans, and it's really in your psyche. And 23% of the mortgages are underwater in this country. To get confidence back in this country, you need to have housing prices start to move up, and then as housing prices move up, there'll be some new construction.
Jim, do you have a sense of timing, or can you quantify that move up? I mean, we've heard some people say, look, during the housing bubble, houses were on average, let's say 35% overvalued. Now in many areas, they are at 35% lower. Does that mean that we're back at the mean? I mean, are we 2 years away from a housing recovery, 3 years away?
Well, I've been probably a little too optimistic, but I would say there's another 5 to 10% fall on house prices in parts of the country. In other parts, it's already bottomed out. By the end of this year, I think we should start to see something. Some
sort of support, right, if not any kind of strength.
Yes, I think that's right. It's going to take many, many, many years to get back to where we were, and certainly that 30-some% fall. One of the numbers I saw is that the housing prices have fallen now deeper than they did in the Depression, which is unbelievable, but it's true.
Jim, I want to squeeze something in before we go. People always wonder what we talk about in commercial breaks. Well, during this particular commercial break, we were talking about banks. And you were saying how, if we aren't careful, the U.S. banking industry could end up in the same position the European banking industry is right now. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's really the U.S. economy more than the banking industry. And if the U.S. economy falls, the banks are going to fall. And we're starting to see a very, very large growth in the deficit. And that's what the debate in Washington's all about. And we'll see numbers in 20 years that make us look like Greece if we don't change our spending habits in this country.
Now, are you and Wilbur at W.L. Ross and Company investing on the basis of that expectation? Are you making decisions that reflect those kinds of concerns?
We are distressed equity investors, and we are looking at places where we think the banks have already taken their medicine. We've invested in four to 9 banks in the U.S., and we have a bank in the U.K. So what we do is we try to find banks with good management teams, good core deposits, and good assets, which is hard to find.
Is the implication that you see more distress to come, for example, in the U.S. banking industry?
There's probably another 300 to 500 banks to be closed down in the U.S. at this point.
Okay, well, actually,
quite a number, isn't it?
That is quite a number, and